Started. Okay, please forgive my scratchy voice. I feel great this morning, other than I still have this thing in my throat, but I'm over most of the other stuff, so thanks. Mark, we're online. Please call the roll.
Representative Banks? Here. Representative Conrad?
Here.
Representative Heiner?
Here.
Representative Knapp?
Here.
Representative Larson?
Here.
Representative Lawley?
Excused?
Representative Tarver?
Semi-excused. He's trying to get here as fast as he can on the city streets.
Representative Western? Chairman Burkhart?
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. We'll take the bills, and that there was some confusion in the order they were posted. So first one up is House Bill 145, open banking amendments.
Didn't change it.
And Representative Western will present the bill. Representative, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cyrus Western, House District 51. So I want to bring to you House Bill 145. As I said in introduction, this is a bit of a cleanup bill, and it's kind of updating some of the language we have. So pretty straightforward. This bill really, there's two main components to it. And it starts on page 2, lines 1 through 3, defining customer means a natural person or an agent, trustee, or representative acting on behalf of a natural person. This was done, we brought this in the interim in accordance with some of the federal rulemaking. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the federal agency, that deals with these types of issues for individual consumer matters. And so they have been in rulemaking on this type of stuff for quite a while. If you look at the Dodd-Frank Act that passed in, I think, 2010, and they're still going through rulemaking on some of that, which is obviously doesn't speak well of the rulemaking process at the federal level and how long they take. But anyway, they've been doing some updating to their definition, and so this was done in consultation with that. And of course, the other component is on page 2, line 17 through 20, the participating bank shall limit the accessible customer data to that which is necessary for the customer to receive a product or service from the third-party financial service provider. And so the reason we brought that is oftentimes data is huge, right? Your personal data is huge. That means money, that can be commoditized. And so the federal rules regarding data, I don't think are stringent enough when it comes to personal data. And so one of the things we wanted to do, and one thing that does happen is in practice is some of these APIs, these application program interfaces, is not only will they get the data they need to perform the service that they're supposed to, but they'll try to capture all this data, right? The more data they have on hand, the more they can get creative in what they want to do with it, which conceptually is fine, but it's your data and you need to consent to that. And that because we brought this language out of concerns of data privacy and protecting your data, which is basically to say to these folks, hey, you can use only the data you need to do the thing that you have been contracted to do. All this other data, you don't get to use it. You don't get to include it in any of your products. So, and if you do want to use other data, you have to come back to that bank and have a new contract asking for that specific types of data. So that was why we brought that, was to make sure we've got maximum provisions protecting that customer data. So that's really kind of the long and short of it. Committee members, if you do have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, questions for Representative Western? Representative Conrad.
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. Representative Western, just a question, just for my education. What is accessible customer data? We say we're going to limit that. What specifically is limited? Do you have an example?
Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, most certainly. So I think we also have to keep this in context of the whole open banking concept. In the financial sector, there are what are called APIs, these application program interfaces, and there are these companies. So for example, a big one, Plaid is a big one. I think they're a $4 or $5 billion company. I mean, they're pretty serious. They've got hundreds of employees. They are an API that specifically interacts with, say, your bank and your phone to facilitate a financial transaction. So a lot of the money transmitters that are licensed money transmitters, for example, Venmo, PayPal, those kind of things, they have to use APIs to fulfill their business model. Without them, it just won't work, right? And this is basically just saying that all the data that they collect, from your bank, all sorts of personally identifiable information, all that kind of stuff, that in order for them to provide that service, they can only access the data that they specifically need, that they are contractually allowed to access. All the other, so when, in practice, what this means is that when an API goes to, a bank, that contract, if this is passed, is required to ensure that there is language that they can only use specific data to render the service that the contract says that they must. So again, you can kind of use your imagination for personal identifiable information, but birth date, all that kind of stuff. I mean, some of these apps, quite frankly, they will track a lot more than just that kind of stuff, right? By virtue of an app even being on your phone, they can track your location, phone usage, all those other kind of stuff that goes on. That's obviously beyond the scope of this bill, but this pertains specifically to that relationship between that API, that vendor, and the bank that they're engaging with.
Okay,
Thank you.
other questions? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Western. So would this also apply to, say, a company such as like Rocket Money, where they are able to take the data from your bank account, your transactions, and help with a budget? Would this bill apply to that as well?
Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, absolutely, it would. Anybody that has to, for example, one of the banks I use is First Northern Bank of Wyoming and Sheridan. If those guys want to provide this service with them, this type of language would absolutely affect the contract that they have to sign with First Northern Bank to get that data to provide that service. Absolutely.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, so in those lines 17 through 20, where it says accessible customer data to that which is necessary for the customer to receive a product, do you see that as depending on whose perspective it is, somewhat vague, whether it's the company that sees it as necessary, the customer, the bank? I wondered if to make it clear, would you be acceptable to put something more in there like to that which is necessary and voluntarily provided by contract?
Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, there's that interplay between the bank and the API that they want to contract with, right? I mean, I think the example that Representative Larson is a good one. They have to come to that bank and say, okay, this is what we're pitching you on, but to do that, we're going to need data A, B, and C. So there's going to be some give and take in that contract, but this simply just ensures that they can't come out and because what you will see and what is the case, and this is just outside the kind of the financial APIs, but just APIs in general, right? The ones I mentioned are specifically towards money transmission, financial transactions, that kind of stuff. But what we see out there in general across the whole API universe and just apps on your phone is that they are taking all of your data or huge swaths of it, right, from all of their users, and they're aggregating that data and they're storing that data. And so this is just trying to make sure we have those sideboards. And so it avoids that larger dynamic that is just simply the reality of the data world and the digital world that we are interacting with on our phones and in our computers. So that's the specific scope. Again, there will be some give and take between the vendor and the bank involved in a transaction. I think if you want to insert the word voluntary, obviously that's up to the committee and up to you, Representative, but I think the language we've gotten there does a pretty good job of defining a pretty narrow scope with not a heck of a lot of wiggle room if I'm an API trying to gather a bunch of extra data that I don't actually need.
Okay, other questions? Other questions? Okay, Representative, thank you. You can stay there or come back up here and join us if you wish. So I see no other legislators. Nobody from the governor's office. Okay, state agencies. Commissioner Bishop, please come up. Proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you. Is
Microphone, I think. Is it on?
that better? I might have
That's
to
better.
get
Thank you.
closer. Thank you. No, I don't have a whole lot of talking points on this one. As a Representative Western said, this is something that came up during the interim committee, the blockchain committee. So we've been working with them throughout the interim period. And some of the changes that are in this amendment came from, like Mr. Western said, from the CFPB on lines 1, 2, 3, customer. That was just to line up the definition of customer to that, which is in the Dodd-Frank Act. And then the CFPB, it's actually, they've changed it, this definition in their proposed rules. They did come out with proposed rules late last year. They're not finalized yet. But I do think that the language in this bill does match up with what is actually in the law that the CFPB is using. Then the second amendment, that also came kind of like what Representative Weston was saying. How this has worked in the past has been, it's called a screen scraping. You give a third party access to maybe it's your bank account, you give them your actual login credentials, they log in and they take everything, whether or not they need it or not. And so we think this is an important piece to help protect the consumer and give the consumer a little bit more information and control over their data. So how this will work is Representative Larson's example was great. You sign up with a third-party budget app that then must request information from your bank account. So that app will contact the bank and say, this is the information we need using an API. Now, with this law, what will need to happen is then the bank will have to provide a notice to the customer. That's already in place. And then the customer has to give the express written consent to share that information. So we're in rulemaking right now. I'm about to start that hopefully this week on more things that need to be in that notice. And this is going to be one of them, is making sure that the customer can identify what information of theirs is going to be shared. We don't, is it broad, is it narrow, is it just your account balance, or is it everything that you can get? The customer will need to know that before they give that consent. And this will help. I think we felt that was an important piece, important enough that it was up to the committee or the legislature to see whether or not you wanted to put that in law rather than just have me put it in rule. But with that whole concept of screen scraping right now, that's getting a lot of, I think it's being criticized heavily at the federal level. That's one of the things the CFPB rules didn't really include. And I think that's been criticized as well, was how do you limit the information these third parties can get from the bank, just to make sure the customer knows exactly what they're giving access to. So with that, I don't have really any other comments, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on how this might work.
Okay, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, so I was just wondering, so how do you envision this form looking when the customer customer has to go to the bank and fill it out? Do they have to just check boxes that they're okay with those specific data points being shared? Or is that agreement set between the API and the bank, and then the customer just has to approve all of that information being shared?
Commissioner?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson. Yes, so there'll be several points to this process. One, there'll be some type of agreement between the customer and the third party. That's what will start the whole process. Then there will be a request from that third party to the bank using an API. At that point, what we're going to be putting in rule is before the bank can even use that third party, they have to do their due diligence on that third party. This is something that's already required. It's an important part of banking is this third party risk management. And so in our rules, we actually say you have to make sure that you can operate in a safe and sound manner. So that API is only accessing what the bank is comfortable with. From within that access, that third party will be requesting certain bits of information. It might be like I'll just do data A, B, and C, for example. So before the bank can do that, they will have to then provide a notice to the customer. And that's what we're working on in rule of what all needs to be in that notice. It might be things like this is the third party that's requesting it. This is the information they're requesting. Here's how you can revoke your access, things like that. That's what's going to be in rulemaking. But from there, then the customer just has to give, it's just right now in the language, it just has express written consent. That's fairly broad. But I do believe that they must have to sign some type of consent form saying, I agree to this, what you've given me in the notice. Hopefully that answers the question.
Other questions for the commissioner? A question? Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
So just so I'm clear, we're in public testimony. Anyone else from the public wish to testify on House Bill 145? Anyone online? Nope. Okay. One last chance. All right, public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Conrad, seconded by Western. Discussion? Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, just to provide maybe some additional context for the committee, technically this should be a committee bill, but the reason you're seeing it's being sponsored by individual members is because our last blockchain meeting was before the last minerals meeting. Because this deals with Title 13, all the banking regs, it was kind of impossible for us because once we had finished deliberation in blockchain, we couldn't refer to a minerals committee because we had no meetings left before the session. So that's just some additional context.
Okay, everyone understand that? Why it's a personal bill? Everyone understand the blockchain has to submit their bills through this committee? Okay. Committee? Question being called. Mark, would you please call roll?
Representative Banks? Aye. Representative Conrad?
Aye.
Representative Heiner?
Aye.
Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Larson?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Excused.
Representative Tarver? Aye. Representative Western? Aye. Chairman Burkhart?
Aye. Mark, did Representative Lawley leave a proxy? Okay, leave the vote open. She should be here. She's presenting another committee. If she isn't here by the time we adjourn, then she doesn't get the vote. It just goes as excused.
House Bill 145 is a due pass.
Okay. The next bill for our consideration is House Joint Resolution 3. And this is Representative Larson's bill. So Representative, you down to the table? Everyone needs the experience of presenting in front of this committee. And proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Today I bring you House Joint Resolution 3. It's a resolution in support of meaningful state and local government involvement in drafting proposed federal rules, resource management plans, and environmental impact statements. So just to give a little bit of background, this stemmed out of various federal rules and actions that have taken place in the past year, such as the Rock Springs BLM Resource Management Plan, and then the Natural Asset Company's federal rule. And so we've highlighted a few of those actions that the federal government has been taking as we go into page 2. But on page 1, we're just stating that the NEPA process requires federal agencies to prepare environmental impact statements. If you go to page 2, it talks about the BLM's proposing rules pertaining to conservation, landscape health, and fluid and mineral leases and leasing process. And then goes into the next paragraph talking about the Rock Springs planning area for the Bureau of Land Management. And then also talks about a proposed rule through the USDA for old growth forest conditions across the national forest system. Talks about the the New York Stock Exchange to adopt a listing of standards for natural asset companies that was pulled out from a federal rule. We felt that we better leave it in there because we kind of know where their position is at on that. And that, I guess I'll leave that up to the committee if you want to leave that in there or not. If I would view that as a friendly amendment to pulled that out of there since it lists a specific federal regulation number, so it might not apply properly if we have it in there as it reads now. But it also does an all-encompassing statement on page 3, starting on line 6, where these aforementioned or similar rules, resource management plans, environmental impact statements negatively affect Wyoming, including Wyoming's agriculture, energy, mineral, and recreation industries. And then it just goes into the statement from the legislature that we're not okay with these rules being proposed because they hurt our industries. And then it goes on to say that we'll send this to the Secretary or the President of the United States, President of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States Congress, and to the Wyoming Congressional Delegation. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Representative Larson? Representative Conrad?
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. Representative Larson, nice job. I would take up on your offer as it relates to a friendly amendment at the appropriate time to delete on page 3, 1 through 4, if that's applicable to the remainder of the committee.
We'll take that up as we get to amendments. Other questions for Representative Larson? Okay, Representative, thank you. So with that, I'll open public comment. Any other legislators in the room? Any other agencies? Okay, anyone else? Don't argue who goes first. I'll pick.
Mr. Chairman, he's younger and prettier, so I recommend him. If that's all right with my good colleague.
Mr. Chairman, I will start.
Please.
I'm Travis Deetime, I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association, and really appreciate the bringer of the House Joint Resolution. You know, I think what we are seeing, and we're going to continue to see from this administration coming down and really not comfortable going forward for the next 5 years. You know, when you have to break an omelet, when you make an omelet, you break a few eggs. With this administration, Wyoming is the egg. And we need to do everything that we can to kind of push back to ensure that we're at the table. So the mining industry fully supports the resolution, and we really appreciate the representative bringing it forward.
Questions for Mr. Detai? Representative Conrad?
Chairman Burkhart, thank you. Mr. Director Detai, is there anyone else we're missing on these in terms of agencies? Do we capture them?
Mr. Detai?
Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, I would probably have to go back, but I think the way it's written right now, it kind of hits what we needed to hit at this point in time.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Detai. Mr. Moline?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting firmly in support of this resolution. It's an extremely federal lands, and their actions dealing with those properties are extremely important to my industry. They're also important to not only how they affect the grazing, but also my good friends in the mining industry. If they can't mine, we don't have a source of material to keep our operation going, so it's in our best interest to keep them operating and profitable. So sitting firmly in support of this, I think this might be one of the most important, best pieces of legislation coming forward out of this session. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have.
Okay, questions for Mr. Moline? Good. No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
both. Other public testimony? Retired Representative Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recovering politician, I like to refer to myself as.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Wyoming. We're on and in favor of this.
and again, your name just for the record.
Oh, Tyler Lindholm, sorry, sir. On and in favor of the legislation. I did want to kind of add on some belt and suspenders a little bit in regards to legislation that I think it's important to note. Specifically, when we're talking about or similar proposed rules, having spent a little bit of time on the Wyoming House floor, you do have attorneys on that floor. And language that could be considered or construed to be overly broad might end up as a piece of debate. And so that might be something that the committee looks at. I don't have any possible solutions, but I did want to bring that to your attention. And I also appreciate that the bringer of the legislation bringing up removing on page 3, lines 1 through 4, just because that's no longer really a thing that's moving forward. And then also, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, towards the end in your be it resolved portion, as far as transmitting copies, it might be worthwhile adding in transmitting the copy to the directors of those various agencies that you're trying to catch the attention thereof as a possibility. But very much on and in favor of the legislation. We think it's a great piece. There's also federal legislation that does dovetail into this that was brought by a representative in Utah that specifically cited the need for NEPA to be handled by state agencies when federal agencies are delinquent in their required duties.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Lindholm? Any questions? Mr. Lindholm, thank you. Okay. Anyone else in the room? Anyone online? Okay, if you'd admit them.
She's ready.
Yes.
She's ready.
Okay. Okay, if you'd please identify yourself for the
Good
record.
morning. Holly Kennedy here with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. Glad to speak in support of this bill today. As you are probably aware, our 34 conservation districts across the state of Wyoming are recognized as cooperating agencies. And that is a responsibility that our conservation districts take very seriously. And as you are probably aware, at the 11th hour, along with our government entities, those voices were cut out of the decision in the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. And I think it speaks to the importance of respecting that duty to include cooperating agencies. We all know that the best management decisions are often those that are made closest to the ground. And so we appreciate that this bill helps reinstate the importance of that relationship. So with that, I would stand for any questions and again, rise in support of this bill.
Questions for Ms. Kennedy? Any questions? Okay, Ms. Kennedy, no questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Burkhart.
Okay, one last time, any other public testimony? Not seeing any, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Larson, seconded by Banks. Discussion. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple of things I forgot to mention when I was doing the presentation. This bill was drafted in coordination with the Chief Executive's office to make sure that we had everything included at that time. And so also on the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, we had over 30,000 public comment submissions. 20,000 roughly being via email to the field office manager, and then the rest being submitted through their online portal. And then in regards to the amendment regarding agencies and sending their directors of agencies, I'll probably bring something with some language for on the floor for that in committee of the whole or some other point through the amendment process.
So Representative, that was in section 4, you'll bring additional agencies?
Yes.
Okay. Other discussion? Okay. All right, so we'll go through the joint resolution. Page 1, page 2. Representative Conrad.
Chairman Burkhart, is this the appropriate time to insert or ask for an amendment?
Yes.
I would like to favorable consideration on page 2 and line 16, deleting the word "and," replacing that with "or future BLM resource management plans and environmental impact statements, semicolon.
Okay, could you repeat that, please,
Yes,
slowly?
page 2,
Okay,
line 16, delete the word and replace it with or future BLM resource management plans and environmental impact statements, semicolon. And the rationale for that, Mr. Chairman, is I don't believe sadly that the BLM's done with resource management plans in the state of Wyoming. Likelihood is that the resource management plans will now move west to the Kimmer office. So I want to protect future.
okay, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Larson. Go ahead, Representative Larson, discussion?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think this just would be a correction to the amendment, no substantive change, but the way it's structured is there's an and at the end of every paragraph. So let's not strike and, let's just add that language before the semicolon, if that's favorable.
Is that favorable to the sponsor
I view that as favorable.
and to the second? Okay. Mark, do you have that?
What I have is, on line 16, strike the word and insert or future BLM resource management plans and environmental impact statements or plans?
Statements,
Statements.
semicolon, and then the word and.
Okay?
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, amendment is adopted. Page 3. Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we strike lines 1 through 4 on page 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Conrad. Discussion? Okay, I don't necessarily oppose the amendment. However, I'll suggest an alternative. See what you think.
Okay.
Whereas the New York Stock Exchange had filed, just change has to had, leave it as an example.
I think that's favorable.
So, okay, so what we're saying is, then, instead of deleting it, okay, so if you would
Just change
change,
one
if you
word.
change your motion, then we don't have to do votes and things.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would like to change my motion to delete lines 1 through 4. I do not want to do that. I'd like to just strike has and replace with had.
Okay, is that okay with the second?
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, anything else on page 3? Okay, then I'll propose an amendment on line 6 to delete similar and replace it with other. Seconded by Larson. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Okay. Page 4, and Representative Larson, you said you would bring a committee of the whole amendment to add those other agencies. Okay, any other discussion on page 4? Okay, committee? Question being called. Mark, please call the roll. We're voting on House Joint Resolution 3.
Representative Banks?
Aye.
Representative Conrad?
Aye.
Representative Heiner?
Aye.
Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Larson?
Aye.
Representative Lawley?
Excused?
Representative Tarver?
Aye.
Representative Western? Chairman Burkhart?
Aye.
8 ayes, 1
Excused.
Excused.
And with that, considering that Representative Lawley is not here, I will close out both votes. Like I said, and we've established that as our rules, votes don't stay open beyond committee meeting. Committee, any other things for the committee? All right, with that, we're adjourned. Representative Wiley, sorry you were a little late if you wanted to speak on that. Okay. And for the committee, time to start thinking of interim topics. I think we already have like 3 or 4 lined up, but start putting your thoughts together.